So we're going to go ahead and start with that. All right, I'm going to call this meeting to order. Our February 2022 meeting of CDC. It looks like I'm the only preacher here. Dorothy, I think Dorothy's in seminary, so she can do it. But she looks, I see her face, and so I will lead us in our invocation then. Father, thanks for today and for the chance we have to be here to learn more about the economics of the city of DeSoto. We pray that you would strengthen our economics, help us to be a city that's profitable for our businesses, help our leaders to have wisdom in knowing how best to encourage small business. We pray that this would continue to be and increasingly be a city where parents can raise their children and their children can be educated and they can do business here and do all those things well. We pray for Matt. We're grateful for him and for his expertise. Help us again just to learn from him today about how we can be of service to our city as far as economics are concerned. We pray this in Jesus' name. Amen. Amen. All right. We have just a little bit of old business to talk about real quick. I don't think we have any minutes from the previous meeting, do we?
Yes, we do.
We do. All right. You want to say anything about those minutes as far as Merle Westland, the Soaring Eagle Center is concerned?
This was our special speaker was Ms. Merle Westland, and she gave us an excellent and eye-opening presentation regarding the Soaring Eagle Center, which provides services for adults with special needs.
Awesome. Do I hear a motion to approve those minutes?
So moved.
Okay, I'm gonna let Dorothy be first and Leon, you seconded. So all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. All right, minutes can be filed. B, just I want to mention Gospel Fest. Gospel Fest is going to be this coming Sunday at Faith Bible Church at 4:30. A week from tomorrow. Sunday, it's the 20th. It's right on the sheet you have in front of you. It's a week from tomorrow at Faith Bible Church at 4:30 in the afternoon. Doors open at 4. I wanted you to know about two things that have changed, not really changed. The high school choir cannot be there. So we won't have the high school choir, but we do have, if you look on the bottom of your minutes here, or your agenda, we have Tommy Young West going to be there. And we have also Kat Gardner. I put this young lady's name on our minutes. Ayana Nolan. She is a student at McCowan Middle School, and she has written a Black History Month poem that she's going to come and share. So I'm excited about Ayana Nolan being there. Her mother, they obviously are citizens of DeSoto, but her mother is also an employee of the district. And so I'm excited that we're going to be able to host her. We also have our MC is going to be James Adams. So we're looking forward to that. You can get tickets. Let's talk about this real quick. You can get tickets from anybody in the room, right?
That's right.
I saw Dorothy have her tickets out earlier, so she's selling as we speak.
Yeah.
So you can get tickets there, or the tickets, certainly you can get them at the door. This recording will be on our Facebook page for a while, so people can continue to watch it. And if you need tickets, I'm going to give you my cell number. You can call me. It's 214-394-0118, 214-394-0118. And I would like to sell more tickets than Dorothy. So call me. That's a challenge. The gauntlet has been thrown down.
Right.
Bowling for Scott. Anything you want to say about Gospel Fest next week? Anybody?
It's going to be an exciting event.
It will be. It's going to be a great event. Yep.
We hope to have everybody come out.
All of the proceeds go to DeSoto, deserving DeSoto seniors scholarships.
And the choir.
And the choir. The choir, we were talking this last week with someone, it was in maybe the stakeholders meeting. They're going to Hawaii and Italy?
Spain.
Spain.
Hawaii this year, Spain next year.
Hawaii, so they have some significant travel plans, and so we want to support them in that. So that all of that, those proceeds will go toward those things. Bowling for Scholars. I hope everyone is getting their teams together. That's coming up in March, the end of March, March 26th, from 2 to 5 at our bowling lanes here in DeSoto. Teams of 5, we hope that each team will raise $500 a team. Again, those proceeds go towards scholarships for deserving DeSoto seniors, so please do that. Anything anyone wants to say about Bowling for Scholars in March? Gosh, you all are being quiet today. What's going on? Jordan, Gayla, I don't know, maybe it's the fact that you're not in the room. That everybody, I don't know.
Well, I'm excited about Bowling for Scholars, and I'm excited about the scholarship program this year. I'd just like to say that the applications will be available for the students this week. And we have a deadline for the applications for April 25th. So just help us encourage students to apply for the scholarships.
Gayla, doesn't it feel like we just did this just a little bit ago? And here we are again, almost. This is the middle of February. I mean, we're getting close to the end of the year already. So that's great.
Right.
That's great. So today, our program, just following our agenda, our program is Matt Carlson. Matt has been with the city of DeSoto now for about 6 months. Is that right? About 6 months?
7 months.
7 months now at this point.
It's kind of scary, but been here so little time, you can still count on.
That's true. That's true. He is from the Denver area and came down to us from Colorado. And he is the director. I always get confused, too many titles. The director, the CEO of the DeSoto Development Corporation. The DeSoto Development Corporation previously was known as the DeSoto Economic Development Corporation. Matt knows the city already after 7 months very, very well, and he has much that he's going to be able to share with us today. Information about small businesses in the city, big businesses in the city, economic development, and then future exciting plans the city council's laid out that we're hoping to be able to be involved in as far as economic development. So, Matt Carlson.
Thank you. Thanks much. I sure appreciate the opportunity to speak with you all today and talk a little bit about where we're going. And I'll give you a little bit of background about me, but really, and I always prepare these notes and I diligently sit down and then they pretty much stay there the rest of the time. We just kind of talk. I've been working in economic development for a little over 25 years. I've worked in the southeastern region, especially around Atlanta. I've worked in the Midwest. I've worked in the Mountain States. And now I find myself in North Texas. And people say, wait a minute, you were in Colorado and you came to Texas. Are you okay? The answer is, yeah, I'm okay. Because I found in DeSoto a place that looked a lot like the kind of work I've done in the past. The last city I was with, we grew very, very rapidly over a 7 or 8 year period, put a lot of things in place that precipitated that growth, and found our own space within a very large metroplex, the Denver metropolitan region. That looks a lot like DeSoto in my mind. And when I looked at this and I started digging in, and I was watching meetings, remotely and hearing what our council was talking about, what our city leadership were talking about, it was clear that this is a place where I felt like I could make a difference. And threw my hat in the ring, and end of last June, I joined the city to take on our economic development efforts. And there have been some changes very recently. Last spring, the voters had told us in the previous election that they wanted to change the structure of the development corporation from, in Texas law allows for 2 types of corporations, 4A and 4B. I think a lot of people feel like B came afterwards, so somehow it's lesser. I like to talk about B as bigger, because what it really did, while 4A was established back in the late 70s, in fact, or late 80s, I'm sorry, and actually I advised some of Texas cities where I had colleagues about using local special sales tax and how do you start to use that at the time, there were many communities that weren't benefiting from that 4A arrangement. And so the state legislature, with input from obviously the senators and the representatives, saw fit to create what this 4B category is. And it just allowed cities to better address the challenges that they were facing. 4A looked a lot like industrial development only. Looked like job creation over and over and over and over again. We happen to have a thriving, large, rapidly filling out industrial park, and it has served us very well. It's kept our tax bases low because we have a large, broad tax base. Regardless of what sales tax does going up and down, which always does with the economy, industrial does not. So the taxes that we collect from business personal property tax, the taxes that we collect from the real estate portion of those properties are huge. They're very, very significant in terms of income to the city. But that's really what 4A was designed to do. So cities who didn't have industrial areas or didn't have the opportunity even to recruit industrial businesses were sort of missing out. And so this 4B corporation allows us to consider a much broader range of projects, a much broader range of activities that we can fund with the sales tax that is set aside each year for the development corporation. That sales tax amounts to about $3 million each year. It fluctuates up and down, but it's about $3 million each year that's dedicated to economic development. And it's the job of the board of directors, of which Mr. Crone is the chairman this year. It's a group of 8 people, all of who live in DeSoto, who have a wide range of backgrounds, small business to large business, attorneys to business owners, pastors included, and who listen to the opportunities and advise and consent towards where we're going to put incentives to bring new types of activities to the city. Once that happens, and they've listened to staff who prepared a lot of materials for them to look at, they've made a decision to either support a project or not. Assuming that they support it, then we send it to the city council for ratification. I make a presentation at city council in a public meeting. They get a chance to hear about that project and confirm or have some concerns one way or the other. And so that we can decide whether or not we're going to support a project. And then once we decide to do that, then we begin to engage with whatever that project is. Many times those projects aren't even public until that point. Most of the time, in fact, they're not public. They sort of happen behind the scenes. And so you don't see us out on the front page. You read headlines all the time in the Dallas Business Journal and in the Dallas Morning News about things that are happening. It's always fun to read what people think is happening, or what reporters, I should say, think is happening. Reporters seem to have stopped reporting the who, the what, the why, and the how, and started reporting what they think might happen. I guess that sells newspapers. But the fact of the matter is we have a very active project list. We have a lot of interest in DeSoto from every aspect, every asset class, as I like to call them. That's industrial. That includes commercial space, so commercial office space, and looking at how we increase office space for jobs, office jobs, manufacturing and logistics are kind of our industrial part. And it also includes retail. You know, one of the things that most often, and I know council hears about it a lot from citizens, is we want to see this or we want to see that. And it's a particular business. And it's difficult to respond to some of those needs sometimes, because really recruiting a specific business, it isn't as if you can tell a business that they have to come someplace. If they're looking at that opportunity and it doesn't appear to be profitable to them, more than likely they're not going to join our city. So sometimes it's a matter of us telling the story. Maybe we haven't told the story right. Sometimes it's a matter of they're in such demand in every city that they're picking and choosing and they're looking for the highest return. And if we can't provide that, then they're not going to come here first. They might come here second or third or 10th. Sometimes it's a geographical issue. Sometimes things that we see when we're someplace else He said, man, I'd really love for that to be in DeSoto. So would I, by the way, I live here too. But sometimes as companies expand, they do it on a geographic basis because supply chain is extremely critical. We hear all about it now. Most of us never even thought about it until 2 years ago. But how they are able to provide products to their stores or their locations, it's especially true with food companies, how they're able to get food to those locations such that there's a consistency of product across their locations is very, very important to them because it's their brand that's at stake. So sometimes we just aren't on the map yet. And I say that because economic development is a long-term game. We don't do it for tomorrow. We don't do it for next week. We do it for next year and 2 years and 5 years into the future. We tell that story. We tell it consistently. We show up at the table all the time because I'm a firm believer that you can't influence the outcomes if you're not at the table. So you show up at the table whether or not there's scraps or not, whether or not you're even going to have a plate, you still show up at the table and you still tell your story. And those are critical activities that we are laying the groundwork for now. DeSoto has always done that. Maybe not as aggressively in some areas as I think we will start to do. But I think you're going to see us being more on the stage at the Dallas Regional Chamber, within the Southern Dallas County cities. You're going to start to see us in a lot of places that we haven't necessarily been before. And I think that's going to start to change the types of projects we see and the rapidity of which we see products and projects coming to town. The other adage in economic development is if you have no product, there is no project. And product for economic development is land or buildings. That's what we sell, is a place for somebody to create jobs. And economic development at its core is really not necessarily even creating jobs, but fostering an environment through all of the partners, city council, the school district, the chamber of commerce, community groups, all of those, into creating an environment that breeds jobs, that will grow jobs. If we have that right environment, if we have fertile ground and we put seeds on it and we water it a little bit, it's going to start to grow. That's really our job in economic development. Yes, it means that we're chasing businesses. Yes, it means we're chasing projects. All of those things are true, but what we really have to focus on more than anything else is, do we have the right environment? Do we have the right pieces? Do we have the product to take to the market such that people say, that's the place I want to be? What's the product then? It's a community. It's a place. It's a place that people want to live. It's a place that people want to work. It's a place that people want to play. It's a place where they want to call home, and they're proud to call home, because no matter how many times I say it, I'm one guy. But when I get 55,000 people in DeSoto saying, this is the place to be, trust me, they quit listening to me a long time ago. When they hear you saying that, and Pastor Crone said, what can we do as citizens is we can talk about our community. We can talk about it in positive terms. Hey, look, every community in the world has challenges. We do too. That's not the job isn't to talk about our challenges. Trust me, people will help us do that. Talk about what's here. Talk about why you're here. You make a choice. You make a choice to live here. Why? I make a choice to work here. It's easy for me to tell people why I work here, because this is a community that has great assets and great potential going forward. We have great leadership, both at the elected level as well as at the paid level. You know, I look at my colleagues around, one on my left here, but there are 8 or 10 of us who lead the various departments of the city. And there isn't anybody leading one of those departments who isn't a consummate professional, somebody who knows their craft, knows their trade, and wants to apply it at the highest standards, even in a community of 50,000 people. Most of those people could be working in much larger communities. They've chosen not to for a reason. I don't like working in big communities. It's just not it's not where I really feel most comfortable. I like being in a community this size. And I know that that's my colleagues as well who feel much that way. And we come in every day and we do our jobs because we know that we can achieve those things that you've asked us to do. So one of the things that I put on my notes, that being a newcomer, I guess in some ways, I think that I'm blessed because I bring a completely different view of the world. I don't bring a Texas view. I bring a much broader view than that. I bring a more national view, if you will. Because despite the fact most recently I came from Denver, before that I was in in Lincoln, Nebraska. Before that I was in Atlanta for a number of cities. Before that I was in Los Angeles. So I take a much broader view of watching what's happening on a national basis, because when I look at what's happening in Dallas, it's not an accident. Dallas 30 years ago decided where they were going to be. And then they started prosecuting it day in, day out, day in, day out. The Dallas Regional Chamber is an extremely strong organization, but they understand that they're not alone. They only have the region to support them. And that's why they're so active in our communities for outreach to us. And that's probably not an asset we've used as much as we are going to going forward. But the other thing it allows me is a chance to look. I'm sorry.
That's Connie, her mic is open.
Got it.
Good morning, Connie.
Good morning.
Good morning.
So, but one of the things that it also allows me to do is take a look at just sort of maybe from a little higher level, because I'm not in the trenches sort of yet, at the observations that I've seen in DeSoto, the things I've seen in a short 7 months, but that helped me sort of scratch my head and want to look further. You know, as I looked and I started looking at being part of the Dallas Metroplex, I just started looking at development over the last 25 years. And it's not hard as a developer and as an economic developer, because I've built buildings most of my life, to look and see that development patterns in Dallas are very, very distinct. And especially over the last 20 years, there's been far more development north of I-30 than there has south of I-20. Well, whether that's right or that's wrong is really not the question. The question is why? Development follows capital. That means capital is not flowing to southern Dallas, the cities south of I-20. Investors aren't putting capital there. Why? Now, that's changed a little bit in the last couple of years. You look at Hutchins, they're building buildings as fast as they can. You look at Lancaster, they're building buildings just as fast as they can. But they are massive concrete boxes. It's all about logistics and transportation. There's a multimodal hub in Hutchins that brings rail and freight and rail and roadway all together at once, feeding the ports down in Houston and the Gulf. That makes a lot of sense for transportation. But beyond that, you see a lot of corporate relocations up north of 30. You see a huge amount of growth, retail growth, residential growth, office space growth, which is supporting those corporate relocations. But you don't see that in the South. So I scratched my head and I asked that question. I don't have that answer, by the way. It drives a lot of my thinking as I look strategically at where we're going. I have to ask that question, why? We're probably not positioned to have the headquarters for Amazon in DeSoto. We don't have the land for it. We don't have the buildings for it. I mean, that's simply not in our future. But, you know, most of the recruiting of businesses that I do for corporate headquarters looks like 25 to 75 professionals. There's no reason we can't have those. We've got 35, we've got 20, we've got great access. We have more than enough land to build commercial office space for organizations that size. We have some of those organizations here already. One of the leading provider of software services for cities is located right in our city up here on Hampton Road. And I bet most people don't even know it. So that's one of those things that seems misaligned to me. The other thing that strikes me is I go to council meetings every other week. And almost every agenda has 2 or 3 zoning change items on it. That's not normal. I mean, that's just not normal by any standard. The council is meant to be a policy body. They set policy, and then there are the departments and the other commissions and boards who enact that policy. And yet what we're finding is that zoning is coming to council over and over and over again. And what that tells me is our current zoning, the way we use land, the way we have authorized to be used, land to be used in our current comprehensive plan, which was created, I think for the first time, the one that's been amended now several times, but the initial was created more than 15 years ago, isn't very well aligned with what the market is telling us is needed. The market is telling us what wants to be here and where it goes, and our zoning doesn't align with that. So developers bring a project, they bring it into the city processes it, our planning and zoning, my colleagues in planning and zoning, they take it to the Planning and Zoning Commission. This is the process, if you will. The Planning and Zoning Commission either votes for it or against it, but the court of last resort is always the city council. So whether they vote for it, it still has to come before city council, or they vote against it, it comes before city council. But if they voted against it, they have a little higher hurdle, supermajority, in order to get their project passed. And we've seen a lot of those where council has agreed with planning and zoning, that's not what we want, or that's not what we're going to support. But again, that really the outcome is not as important as the process is flawed. We simply don't know what we want, where we want it, or maybe we do, but we're not telling the development community that such that it aligns, and we let council go to do what they do best, which is act as a policy committee, and planning and zoning puts projects on the ground. We're going to have to get that fixed, and this year we're undertaking a revamp of the comprehensive land use plan. That's a fairly extensive project. I think optimistically we'd like to complete it in a year. I'll be surprised if we're able to do that. But that's only the first step, because what comes after the comprehensive land use plan, which says, here's where we want pieces and parts, then we have to enact ordinances, land use ordinances that support that document. And right now, those don't even align with each other. They're sure not going to align with the new plan. So we're going to have another year of work getting those pieces in place before we're really starting to put these projects, lining up the projects. I think about it like the airport. You stack up aircraft every 5,000 feet for 50 miles, 100 miles out, and they're landing on repeated basis. And that's what we want projects to do, is to stack up and land in DeSoto, one after the other. That's one of the things that I've noticed. And the other thing you can't help but notice, and I have a big map on my office wall, is that there are a lot of rooftops in DeSoto. The map is just littered with, they're everywhere.
What are those?
Rooftops, people's homes.
Oh,
It's homes, they're everywhere. But what you also notice is that the vast majority of development in the past in DeSoto has been done on large acreage lots. You know, that where I get into metropolitan areas and I see 1/6 of an acre, 1/8 of an acre, 1/10 of an acre. And look, I live on a ranch in Colorado. I lived on a ranch in Colorado before I came here, and I really don't want to have to reach out and put my hand on somebody else's house. So I get being distanced, but there's also a place for smaller, for more dense living conditions, because what I like isn't necessarily what the next person likes, nor is it necessarily easily supported from a public services standpoint. When we have large lots, and I don't think I'm talking out of turn here when I say, I bet there's nobody on this phone call or anybody else that if we ask them, hey, do you want your property taxes to go up? They'd raise their hand and say, absolutely, send me the bigger bill, right? So we run into a problem in that we don't have much land. And it's not we don't have any land, but we've developed in such large lot fashion, and our property taxes are what they are for those pieces of property, and they're probably not going to generate a lot more money. Year after year after year, those taxes are not going to go soaring, as it's politically unpalatable to do that. Never mind the fact not one of us really wants to raise our property taxes, no matter what you tell me you're going to give me in return. That's a hard sell. You know, if we're talking about public safety and we're talking about education, lots of times we can talk about taxes. Outside of that, it's a tough sell. So how do we get more fiscally responsible with future development? How do we generate more taxes per acre? So think about, you know, on a piece of call, and use the acre as the measure. On a per acre basis, how do we make it generate more money than an acre today does with our house on it? We want those acres that we develop going forward to produce more taxes, so it broadens our tax base and keeps our overall real estate taxes low. Well, that means we have to start talking about density. That means multifamily living. That means taller buildings. That means congregating people more closely together in certain areas. Let's face it, we don't really want that everywhere in our city. There isn't anybody who would agree to that. City council, not a staff member, nobody would suggest that. But what we would suggest from a staff level standpoint is that there are places where it's appropriate to push things together. You know, what we know is that young people like living in a more dense environment. They enjoy having their friends and their neighbors closer, and they enjoy being engaged in activities that are, if not right outside their door, very close by. They like running, they like riding their bikes. They like a walkable environment instead of an auto-driven environment. That spells density in every way, and we have opportunities to do that. It probably looks like redevelopment. It looks like projects that we're proposing, and I'll talk a little bit about those. But that's a conversation that this community historically has not been very comfortable with. For some reason, density's kind of gotten a bad name, you know, and I mean, just say multifamily and you just watch people's eyes glaze over. But multifamily doesn't mean today what it used to mean. I mean, I see garden variety apartments. I see single family units that just happen to be rented. They aren't owned. People can't afford them, but they can't afford to pay the rent, but they really don't want to share a wall with their neighbor. They want to be able to have a dog in a little backyard. And so builders are building single family homes in a village, if you will, a village environment. They're rented, but they really are single family. They have a garage. It's meant to create community because we're closer together. It's more likely we're going to have a cookout on the cul-de-sac on the weekend than it might be if we're spread out. Young people like that style of living. And we talk about wanting young people to come to DeSoto, that we have to get in places that feel right for them and give them a chance to begin to enter the real estate market at a level that's affordable, that's reasonable, that makes sense for them, and they'll grow up into those shoes as well. It's one thing about gray hair is I've watched this happen over time. And you know, when the millennials started taking over the world and they said, we want to live in, you know, in dense situations downtown. And I said, yep, right up until you want a dog and 2 kids. And guess what? They're moving out of downtowns. It's happened before and it'll happen again. Whether you call it millennial or Gen X or Gen Z or whatever we're going to call the next generation. They'll do the same thing. They enjoy being together. They enjoy the party life. They enjoy the camaraderie that it brings. And then they move apart a little bit because they need a little more space. So housing costs are rising, and that's making things less affordable. That argues that we need to look at different styles of housing. We need to, and never mind the fact that not everybody in this room is as gray as me. We're all aging though, and as we age, we want different things. I would love to live in a place where I can walk out the door, lock it, and go visit my kids in Atlanta, and not worry about mowing the lawn, not worrying about the dog, not worrying about any of that. I can lock it and leave it, but I'm gonna come back, you know, at the end of the weekend or a long week, and I'm gonna be right back where I was. It's a completely different style of living than what we have in DeSoto today. But if we want people to age in place, we're gonna have to start putting those on the ground too. Because as we get to be 50 and 60 and 70, that's the kinds of things we're gonna be looking for. We're looking for amenities that are closer to us. Maybe we don't wanna drive as much. Those are all things that are important. City Council hears this, and they listen to this routinely. We've met in the time that I've been here now twice to talk about the strategic plan. With great wisdom, they put in place a strategic plan several years ago that started to lay out the future of DeSoto. It started to get a vision, a shared vision out in front of our community. And we routinely, twice a year, we revisit that. If that translates out into what we do within our departments, that translates out into our daily work plans. And as a result of a lot of work, there are several projects that are part of that strategic plan. Underneath there are a number of areas, but they fall underneath the healthy economy portion of this, the vibrant economy. But they really affect every single portion of what we do and every aspect of what we do in that strategic plan. But I think two of the most exciting ones and that have been in the works for a while, and probably the longest one, is the Hampton Road corridor. The 1 mile stretch of Hampton Road that reaches from Pleasant Run down to Beltline and those businesses that are on that road in between. There's lots of stuff there. There's lots of stuff you drive by, you probably don't even know is there. And I'll bet what would even surprise you more is how many of those are vacant buildings. How many of those are vacant lots and how many of those are vacant buildings that are just sitting there? And I know my friend the chief, has to go drive by those and make calls to them because there's disturbances and things there all the time. That corridor looks like a great place for us to start to rethink the DeSoto of tomorrow. And that began clear back in 2005. RTKL did a study, a lot of public outreach, lots of visioning work that said, if you wanted to create a central place in DeSoto, call it a downtown, right? We don't have one. We don't have a downtown here. We don't have an old main street that we can revitalize. We don't have those things here. But if you wanted to create one, where should it be? And resoundingly, what we heard from our community, Hampton Road. Okay, good start. That's 15 years ago, 16 years ago, we heard that. Some work. Back in 16, the Pegasus group came and revisited that, said, is that still true, right? In 16, in 10 years, 11 years, faces have changed on council, faces have changed in the community. We revisited that. Is that still valid? Yes, absolutely. This past 2 years before I got here, we undertook work again to revalidate that. And as recently as last fall, when we sat down with council, we heard from our council, it's time for us to implement this. It's time to make it so. That's what we're doing. We've engaged firms to re-engineer the roadway. I think it's safe to say, is it? So today you see 6 lanes on Hampton Road. You see 6 lanes going at lickety split. I know what's posted there is 50 miles an hour. I think the chief would tell you that's optimistic at best. What we also learned as part of that study is more than half of the traffic that comes up on Hampton Road every morning comes from south of us. It doesn't even come from our city. It comes from Glen Oaks, it comes from Red Oak, Glen Heights. And it's a high-speed corridor to get to I-20. There exists a high-speed corridor to get to I-20. It's called I-35. You just have to get over there and get on it. And then do your high-speed thing. Don't do it on Hampton Road. Well, we're never going to stop that unless we change what's there. If you want a different output, you have to have a different input. So council has listened and carefully considered and made the election as part of this revitalization to create a destination, a place we'll call downtown DeSoto. We're creating it out of whole cloth. We're taking mud and building it up. They've said we're going to narrow the road. We're going to change that traffic pattern. They can get off on Bear Creek. They can get off on Parkerville. They can get off on Beltline. They can get on I-35, do what they got to do. They can go the other way and get off on Cockville Hill or Westmoreland, get up to 67, get up to 20, get up to Dallas. A lot of our community gets up and goes to work in Dallas, and we have to make sure there's a way to get there. We have that already. It just continues to use Hampton Road because nobody's taught them a different trick. Trust me, when we put Jersey barriers out to redo that road, they're going to learn a different trick. There's no 2 ways about it. We're going to change 6 lanes to 3. 1 lane each direction with a turn lane in between. Probably the max speed on that road is going to look like 25 miles an hour. Now, imagine that. Yeah. Who wants to push a stroller with a child in it down a road that's going 60 miles an hour? You don't see them out there. Nobody's going to ride a bike. Nobody's going to walk. Nobody's going to push a stroller. But if it's going 25 and people are walking and there's a protected bike lane, people might actually do that. They might actually come out and recreate and congregate in that area. If we take the bridge that is over Heath Creek today, which most of the time you drive over it, not even know there's a creek down there. we can make that into a really pretty pedestrian environment that re-envisions that bridge, makes it a true pedestrian experience where you could stop and enjoy the bridge, take some pictures, enjoy the nature that's around you there, that right now is just kind of overgrown. That's part of it. It takes the utilities and underground. So we don't have wires strung all over the place and tilting poles, and changes the lighting so it feels more like a place you'd want to walk, a place that invites you in. That's the Hampton Road Corridor. It's a huge project. It'll take a decade to complete, but take a couple of years for the road. But what happens behind the curve is so much more important than what's in the roadway. And engaging the right developers with the right vision for the right kinds of projects, for the right kind of housing, the right kinds of businesses, the right kinds of environment, putting parks in place that are programmed through our Parks and Rec department, all of those things have to happen behind the curve. And that's going to take about 10 years till we get there. It may even take longer than that, because we have to convince the same developers who are building in Frisco and Richardson and Plano, building those projects today north of 30, that there's a place they can build a project like that south of 20 that will engage not just DeSoto, it'll engage Lancaster, it'll engage Duncanville, it'll engage Cedar Hill. People will want to come here and spend time and spend their money, and that helps us with our tax situation. That's a very, very exciting project that's happening. There's going to be a whole lot of talk about it. It's expensive. Everybody's going to take a huge breath. We're coming before council on Monday night to talk about what it's going to cost and then how we find the money to do it. Can I say? The answer is not raising taxes. That's not an acceptable solution, but this project will cost in excess of $30 million. Now that's spread over 5 years. Okay, there's a lot of pieces and parts, but it's a $30 million project. When you make that investment as the city in a project, developers pick their heads up. Because what we're asking developers to do is build projects that are 60, 70, 150 million, 300 million. Their projects make our roadway look like just a drop in the bucket. The problem is we've got to build the road first. So we're going to take a big bite. We're going to get out on the limb. We're going to take the risk, because when we do that, we eliminate the risk for the development community, and we'll start to see those projects lining up. We're already talking with developers that you would recognize as building elsewhere in Dallas about what they want to do here, and they're excited about it. The adjunct to that is Beltline Road. Beltline Road is a state highway. It's TxDOT controls it. You know, we get to have it through our city, but they really maintain it. They do the light, they do the signalization and all. It's an avenue that has not received adequate attention from a planning standpoint. And what's developed along it, not unlike a lot of state roads if you drive around Texas, is very haphazard in terms of form. Things sort of go wherever the landowner wants them to, with very little thought in terms of maybe that works today, but will it work tomorrow, and will it work 10 years from now? So we've missed some opportunities, because we can't go back and take down what we put up. But we've missed some opportunities through lack of planning to shape what happens on Beltline for the next 20 years. That stops today. We're undergoing a study that looks at those commercial nodes that look like the future on Beltline, because it's where what land we have left is the south end of town, south and west. It looks like that's where we're going to see development, which means they're going to use Beltline as a corridor. Then we need to be thoughtful about what we put there. We need to be thoughtful about how we develop it. That study is underway now. It'll come in later this year. It'll become part of our comprehensive plan study. It will lay out not only what we think ought to develop there form-wise, how it should look, how it should feel, but it will also give council, for the first time, one of our comp plans to give council the tools from a financial standpoint to say, if we do that, here's the financial future, and why would we undertake something less? Doesn't mean you can't, but you need to know what the payoff is or what the cost is, such that you know to make wise decisions, robust decisions about what those future projects look like. That's happening with the commercial notes study. That will also engage the 35 corridor from Pleasant Run down to the town, to the edge of town, which is completely undeveloped. What is there is just sort of spotty in a couple of car sales places. It isn't planned. It's not well thought out. If you're familiar with Epic West up in Grand Prairie, sort of there on the west side of the road, think that over there where it's nothing but trees and bushes and kind of a bunch of small buildings. Imagine if we were to add 8 large boxes and a whole bunch of supporting pads, restaurants, activities, engaging very much like Grand Prairie. The city of Grand Prairie has taken the backside of that, made some very cool parks and recreation. We have a creek that runs back there. We can engage and activate. If we do that, imagine the taxes, sales taxes that come from that. We are, and we don't market ourselves this way. I think it's a mistake, and we're going to start from an economic development standpoint. We are the back door to Dallas. We are the southern doorstep to Dallas. It's not Waxahachie. We are that doorstep. And that 35 corridor is what greets you. If you're coming up from Austin, that's the first place you really have to stop, once you get through Waco, to have services and those types of things. We're not utilizing it well. City of Lancaster just completed an I-35 corridor study and a Loop 9 study. They're thinking about where they're going on their side. It's high time we think about what we're doing on ours, and we're very much so positioned better to recognize that kind of growth on our side of I-35 than they are futuristically. I hope that that's something we can get council support on, we can get our community support on, we can get the development community support on to begin that process sooner than later, such that we recognize the tax revenues that come from a more robust 35 corridor. And then I talked a little bit about the comprehensive land use plan. It's in the making. It'll be a long-term getting there. We're going to begin to prosecute some of these projects ahead of time, so they will become part of and influence the thinking of the comprehensive land use plan. But we truly believe that we're setting the future for the next 20 years right now. And we can't keep looking back and hoping that what we did does something different. We know exactly what we invested in and what we got. Now it's time to figure out where we're going to go next. That's kind of what I have for you guys. I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Yes, so that's all you listening online and those in the room. Do you have any questions for Matt related to economic development?
Yeah, can you just recap what you said, your top 2 or 3 initiatives are? Recap that real quick.
Sure. I think the most important initiative that we have, though they all have to work in place together, is the Hampton Road Corridor. The Hampton Road Corridor is absolutely critical towards creating what southern Dallas, but really Dallas, calls DeSoto. Our goal is, when you say DeSoto, if I say Trinity Groves, you guys have a picture in your mind right now, don't you? Trinity Groves. Yep. Bishop Arts. You know exactly what I'm talking about. We want, in 5 years, when we say DeSoto, people are like, oh my gosh, have you seen the new cool music venue down there? On Friday nights, you've got to be there. Have you tried the new restaurant, blah, blah, blah? That's where we're going. That's what we're creating. We're going to make that in Southern Dallas. The second one I think that is absolutely critical, and it's much more long range in nature, is the rework of the comprehensive land use plan. That's a joint effort of every department in City Hall. It really comes out of our planning and zoning organization, but I am heavily involved in it, not by accident. All too often planning efforts are just that, they plan, but they don't execute. They are not executable. And all too often in the past, planning documents have lacked what I think is the most critical portion of any plan, and that is the financial feasibility. How does it pay for itself? What does it create in the way of taxes? Look, no matter what we guess that's going to be, we're going to get it wrong. But what I insist on is that we get it 80% right, that we have some idea of where to drive that stake. Because otherwise, we're not giving anything to council that they can make decisions on. If we don't give them the tools to say, is this fiscally responsible, then how can they make a solid decision other than sort of whatever we give them there? So all of us are going to work on that: finance, economic development, building and inspections, planning and zoning. I mean, it's streets, it's engineering. I mean, all of us have to put into that in order to get the output we want. And then I'd say the last one, to take top three, is the commercial node study. It's future commercial node study is what we actually call it. And that envisions those places in DeSoto where we can look out and see that there are commercial opportunities, and how we envision those. How do they fit into the greater plan? And how do we engage the development community in making them happen?
And that there are 4 of those notes. So
5, actually.
5, it takes the votes to all the 5 notes.
Oh, yeah. Remember I said about gray hair? Mine goes with it too. Westmoreland Beltline, Cockrell Hill and Beltline, Polk and Beltline, the 35 corridor from Pleasant Run to the edge of town south, Daniel Dale and Bolton Boone. There are others that are probably going to have to be studied, but those were the ones that seemed most immediate, given the limited scope that we wanted. We didn't want this to be a 3-year study. We wanted this to be a 6-month study. And so we've limited that scope. We're also going to be able to take the lead from the comprehensive land use plan that comes out later to look at where are additional nodes appropriate. If we think of our town a little differently, if we think of Hampton Road as kind of town center, that's where everybody wants to be. But there are lots of other places that are closer to home. So then we think about not just town center, but we think about sort of, I'll call them regional, but they really aren't. They're just sort of large congregational areas. There's probably 6 or 8 of them throughout our town, given the size, that would be more comfortable for the community that's right around us to have things. And we can envision what things are, but kind of a larger circle of congregation. And then even within our neighborhoods, 2 or 3 or 4 HOAs, wouldn't it be nice if we had a little place there that's maybe just nothing more than, gosh, it's a coffee shop, and, you know, I think of the bodegas of New York, you know, where you could find, you know, just really quick, if you were just running home and you need to stop and grab some milk and some lettuce and stuff, a little grocery, just a neighborhood grocery kind of thing, nothing big. I mean, it's a couple thousand feet, just the necessities.
They call that 7-Eleven.
Yeah, yeah. But you know what? But 7-Elevens are more of tap and pay, yeah. But creating those what I call neighborhood centers. And sometimes they aren't even shops. Sometimes it's park. Sometimes the park is the node that creates a neighborhood center. Sometimes it's something else. It might be a church that is the center there. They can be lots of different things. It can be, you know, this kind of an outdoor facility where music is. You know, it can be lots of things. That's our comprehensive plan. That's the big picture. These are just taking some of the low hanging fruit.
Awesome.
Fran, does that get you there? All right.
Other questions?
Any other questions?
You got 4 on the video up there.
Those of you online, do you have any questions?
I have a question.
Kayla?
Yes, Mr. Carlson, thank you so much for your presentation. It was very good. Welcome to DeSoto. We appreciate you. We, as an organization, host a Kwanzaa celebration each year. And this past year, we did that at the Grow DeSoto Marketplace, which is a place for small businesses to start and to grow. For those business owners and for other small and large business owners in the city, does the DDC have any initiatives to help to retain businesses? Or I realize your main purpose is to attract businesses, but do you help to retain businesses? And if not, who does?
So, and I really appreciate that question. It's a great question. Our principal focus is not necessarily to only attract businesses. It is to retain businesses because it's a lot easier to retain what's here than go out and find something new.
Right.
So retaining businesses is vitally important. Currently, we do that in combination with our Chamber of Commerce. That is the way it has traditionally been done here prior to me getting here. I wonder just how effective it's been at outreach and inclusion to our businesses. And one of the objectives, that's on my work plan for this coming year, when I got here, the staff in economic development was one. There was a director and that was it. And he was overwhelmed. Since I've gotten there, I've added a specialist that's helping me on a daily basis, but we'll add 2 different positions to that office over the next 8 to 10 months, one of which will be focused on business retention. And I envision a project that looks very, very dynamic, data-driven, outreach to quite literally electronically, not in person, but outreach to every single business in DeSoto every year to ask what's going on in your yard. What are your pains? What are the things that are making it hard for you to do business? And we're going to take that data and then we're going to put it together and we're going to start to look for the trends and the places and the kinds of businesses. Where can we be most impactful with our time and our dollars to assist our existing businesses? And then we're going to start targeting projects and programs to do exactly that. We already have some things in place. We already are assisting small businesses through the DeSoto marketplace, but even that isn't enough. And I'm not even sure it's all that effective, although it's a good start. We want to build an ecosystem of entrepreneurship for our minority and women-owned businesses. We want to create a place that promotes those small businesses and how to make them bigger, healthier, scalable to become more successful. Those are the things that we're looking at, and it will only grow from there. The mayor just started in the last 2 weeks an ad hoc advisory committee to look at the DeSoto marketplace and advise how we're going to change that and make it better over the next 5 years. That group is currently meeting and doing focus groups to start to advise us along those lines. So I hope that answers your question, Ms. Burton.
It does. I'm very excited about this ad hoc committee. I think that's great. Also, I'd like to publicly thank you for your support of our at our Kwanzaa celebration. We really appreciate that. Thank you so much.
I sure appreciate you holding it there because, you know, awareness is one of the downfalls of the marketplace is people don't understand what it is and that it's there.
Right.
And holding an event like that opens people's eyes, and I sure appreciate it. Appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you.
Sir.
One, I guess 2 questions. One, I know community members always talk about anchor stores that we would like to have. There's a recent announcement of HCC moving some of the other areas, and then people talk about Trader Joe's. I mean, do we target specific anchors and then try to build around that, or obviously it goes to grocery stores, but I mean, are those kind of specific strategies, or is it kind of just?
You know, it's one the answer is, and it's an ever-changing world of retail real estate. Anchored centers are, if you went back 15 years ago, anchored centers were exactly what you wanted to look at. And oh, by the way, everybody in the world targeted the same anchors, right? And guess what? They simply don't come to every community. No matter how much you target it, no matter how you want to tell your story. What's happened in the last 10 years, 5 years in particular, some of it COVID related, but really it was happening before that. It's really the Amazon effect, is targeted retail, anchored retail centers are kind of a thing of the past. You just don't see them being as successful. Grocery anchors have for a long time sort of enjoyed a free ride. You know, they come in and say, I'm gonna plant my flag, and it doesn't matter if it's HEB or it's Kroger or it's Tom Thumb, I'm gonna be here. And then they turn around to the developer and say, so all those other little shops are gonna pay for me to be here because I'm the reason they're here. It's a pretty greedy strategy. It's not one I really support much, nor is it very effective. It's immediately effective, but how many of those same anchored centers do you see sitting empty today with a great big box that nothing is in it? And it happens over and over again. So we as a community make a huge investment. Do we get the return? Not really. If you wonder about that, look at the Albertsons down on Beltline Road and think about how long it's been sitting empty. That was an anchor. Yeah, not much. Or the one across the street here that used to be a Safeway. Heck, we're sitting at, or it's a Safeway. It used to be. This one used to be a, this, maybe that, no, I don't think so. Maybe this was the Safeway. It's now a city hall. I mean, so anchored retail is a strategy, but it's not the be all end all. You know, I enjoy seeing the news talk about HEB. That's really interesting, but the fact of the matter is, what actually happens and what is speculative are two wildly different environments. Grocery works different than any place else any other kind of industry or focused area that you'll ever know. And it is one that is very cutthroat. It is anti-competitive at best. I mean, what few people know is that Albertson still owns that building, and they will not lease it to any other grocery store. So it sits empty, because what's it cut out to be? A grocery store. Yeah, and then they won't lease it to anybody else. HEB recently signed a deal on the Albertsons up here off of Wheatland. There used to be an old Albertsons there, and they've signed a contract. Now, I'm not privy to that contract, although I hear the scuttlebutt. It's weird that Albertsons letting them do it. That's odd. That's a weird thing. But then you hear, well, what it really is a 3-year exclusive that if HEB doesn't build something in it in 3 years, it goes away. There really is not a deal there. There's just an opportunity for first right of refusal.
Is it the Albertsons wall?
I heard it was Albertsons, but maybe it's Walmart.
Is it the
Yeah.
Albertsons?
So
What street was it?
Wheatland. So my caution is there's no one tool that fits. Do we engage those anchors? Absolutely. Absolutely. I keep very close contacts with grocers. I fundamentally, just Matt Carlson's opinion, without any data to back it up, believe that DeSoto is under grocery. I think it is very much so under grocery and not well served. That's something we're going to address. We're going to address it with existing grocers. We're going to address it with future grocers. You know, the chances of a Trader Joe's are slim and none. And not because we aren't a great community, not because we don't have a lot to offer, not because we don't have good pocketbooks that would be more than happy to support it. It's simply a matter of return. There isn't a community in the world that's 50,000 or bigger that doesn't want a Trader Joe's. And until we can demonstrate that we can return 4, 5, 6, 7 times our investment, which we can't, because our trade area isn't big enough and our inputs aren't big enough, they're going to continue to build in those communities that want 6 or can provide 6, 7, 8, 9, 10% return or 10 times return on their investment. It's nothing more than a financial decision and a limited number of stores that they will open in any given year. When you talk about national firms, it's tough to compete. It really is. But there are regional firms and regional concepts that are much easier to manipulate and be able and are much more open to talking about a little different model. Those are the ones that I think we'll spend more time targeting.
Doesn't, to his question, doesn't HEB own property in DeSoto already?
They do.
They already own.
They own the old Kmart store. So let me help you out with what that means. Absolutely
Nothing, right?
They could sell it tomorrow.
Yeah.
They may have bought it to block anybody else from owning it. That's not a unique situation to DeSoto. They own pieces of property all over Texas because they have a 20-year development horizon. They have already banked property for the next 20 years. And that's for 3 different concepts, right? That's HEB superstores, that's the marketplace store. I can't remember what their small structure, it's called something, I don't remember what it is. Yeah, that's their strategy. And by the way, that's Kroger's strategy, and that's Tom Thumb and Albertson's group, you know, the Safeway, Albertsons, Tom Thumb, they're all the same. They're owned by the same venture capital firm. That's the strategy, isn't always to develop, but it's to make sure nobody else does. So what does that mean? Not really much anything. At best, you're going to be dogging them all the time, trying to make keep the building up.
Yeah, so we have that building right there.
Yeah, and it doesn't look really great.
Any other questions
That's
really
bad
quickly as we wrap things up? Would you want to say anything about the fact that the mayor in our state of the city did speak about taxes and about the tax rate not having changed here in the city for what? 7 years, 10 years? 11 years. The
There you go.
taxes have not been raised, but even in the midst of the pandemic, I mean, our taxes still, our sales tax still went up.
Sure. I wish I could tell you that's an anomaly that happened in DeSoto that didn't happen any other place. It happened in many, many communities across the United States. Not surprisingly, because people were shopping from home. Now, the good news is we get sales tax collected on online sales for this little company called Kohl's that has one of their largest distribution centers up in our industrial park. And so the sales tax that flows into there, when everybody's sitting at home shopping instead of going to their local Kohl's store, goes through the roof. That was a huge influx during COVID. It probably is not sustainable, but it sure did help us during the time when other things were dropping off. Other businesses were sorely challenged. Small businesses couldn't maintain those levels of sales. That helped to make up the sales tax difference. Unfortunately, and I think it's the sort of the double edge of that sword, great, we got the income taxes, but I think we're going to find that we've lost a lot of businesses as we come out of the COVID environment. There's going to be a lot of businesses who just aren't going to come back. And that's a loss for any community that all the money in the world from a Kohl's or an Amazon or whatever can't make up for. That's people's lives, and it's our community, and it's our neighbors, and it's services and things that are unique to us that you can't find in Kohl's. That's, I think, going to be the downside to that. But it is a good thing that we got the sales tax.
Good. All right, I'm going to call it right there at 11:08. Matt, thank you so much. That was informative.
My pleasure.
You just got a 400 level class in economic development, DeSoto style, right here from
Thanks.
Matt. Let me just say a couple of things as we close. I want to thank the chief for being here. Thanks for being here, Chief Costa. I want to thank Dinah Marks, our councilwoman, who is up for re-election again this year. So we are grateful for your presence here this afternoon. In light of that as well, we want to talk about our candidate forum. It's coming up in April. Yeah. So we want to host the candidates again. I don't have the date in front of me. If any of the other, Dorothy is our vice president of programming, and Fran is our secretary. Mr. McCallum, he is our treasurer. If you guys know those dates, you can let me know.
It's usually the second Saturday in April.
Second Saturday in April. Okay. What is that?
That would be the 9th.
The 9th, okay, April 9th. So that's gonna be on March 12th, again, is our monthly meeting on the 12th, second Saturday in March. So we'll talk about the program later, and then we'll scholars get your teams together. Otherwise, anybody have any other news you want to share? Okay, then we will see you all next week at Gospel Fest. And I will adjourn this meeting at 11:09. Thanks y'all for being here. Thank you all for being online. Appreciate you. He was worried.